Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Did we ever imagine that we will be talking about Australia, the faraway country of Australia, in Cut the Clutter so prolifically, and that too when we are not talking about cricket? Because when you think Australia, usually you think sport in India. But now, thank the Chinese for it, that we are now looking at Australia again and again. So, in our episode 623, we talked about this 14-point ultimatum of sorts that the Chinese had served on Australia, which was really like somebody telling a defeated country in a war how to behave if they want peace going on. And we found that striking and spoke about it. That was 623. Today is 630. So just a week later, we are again talking about Australia. And again, the context is generally the same, Australia and China, although we will talk about yet another aspect of the story or the larger story coming out of Australia. So effectively, there are three elements to what we will talk about. First of all is the provocation from the Chinese side, which obviously is deliberate following up on that so-called ultimatum. Obviously, the Australians said that we will stick by our sovereignty and we will make no concessions. That ultimatum had some impact in Australian internal debate with the Australian left or liberals coming up and saying you need to normalize your relations with China, you can't be at odds with China, etc. But the Chinese are not about to give up on this. So the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Li Jianzhao, who features frequently in Cut the Clutter in several contexts, including the India context, he tweeted obviously a morph picture of somebody who looked like an Australian soldier, outfitted like an Australian soldier, holding a bloody knife to the throat of a very small child, almost like an infant, very, very small child, holding on to a lamb. So that is to sort of make it doubly symbolic. So this soldier is holding on to the child is holding on to the lamb. This soldier obviously is slitting the child's throat and blood is dripping. And with that, there is a tweet from Li Jianzhao that says, shocked by murder of Afghan civilians and prisoners by Australian soldiers, we strongly condemn such acts and call for holding them accountable. So we know that this scandal has broken out in Australia, that several members of Australian Special Forces, Australian Commando Forces, called SAS Australia, like SAS in Britain, several members of Australian Special Forces were involved between 2007 and 2013. 6 years during their tour of duty in Afghanistan, where the units rotated, but the same regiments, when they carried out illegal criminal killings of 39 innocent Afghans, at least 39 innocent Afghans. Some of those killings were just for fun. Some of those killings were in keeping with what is now called as warrior culture and is being condemned as such. And some were even done simply to blood new soldiers. How do you blood a new soldier? Give the soldier a kill. How do you give the soldier a kill? You capture somebody, maybe even a captured insurgent or Taliban, and say, shoot him. And these are people who are fully in your control. They are prisoners at worst. Or they are just simple, ordinary civilians who you picked up because you have no respect for Afghan life. So this has caused already a great deal of embarrassment within Australia. And there is soul searching going on. So Australia's Defence Forces Chief, Australia's Prime Minister have both issued public apologies on this, and that country is in quite a bit of shock and embarrassment because of these incidents. And there, what the Chinese spokesman has done is to, I'm sorry to use that expression, turn the knife into the heart of the Australians. In fact, even that picture of the supposedly Australian soldier slitting the throat of an Afghan child also is marked, don't be afraid, we are coming to bring you peace. Now you can imagine this has got Australia angry. Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister, has had a very angry statement. He's called this picture falsified truly offensive and repugnant. And he's gone on to say Chinese government should be truly ashamed of this post. It diminishes them in the world's eyes. And the Australian government has also reached out to Twitter to have this tweet taken down. Till we recorded this, no such thing had happened, and the Chinese had no intention of expressing regrets, because as I said to you, this did not happen coincidentally. The Chinese are playing their own game. They are now turning the knife into the Australian hearts and the Australian conscience. Also, in a way, trolling Australia globally, to say that like these guys complain about human rights records in China, for Uyghurs, in Hong Kong, elsewhere. See what their own soldiers are doing. So that is where we stand right now. Now, I had told you that while we talk about this issue, we will also go sideways to look at another aspect of this story, which is the aspect of these killings in Afghanistan. Now, how have these killings been revealed? So, if you remember 1968, it was 16 March 1968 when the infamous My Lai massacre in Vietnam took place. That was revealed later by an investigative journalist, Seymour Hersh, who since then became a legend. He's still around, he's still a legend. Quite a character. That was My Lai. That involved a lot of people killed. Estimates vary, but 347 to 504, depending on how you define the area of My Lai, and lots of women were gang raped, killed, mutilated. It was a terrible thing to happen. So armies are known to do terrible things when they are in total power over the lives of the people where they are based, and there are few questions asked when the big bosses are not there, or where the big bosses are complicit with you. Similarly, after the Iraq war, we had the whole Abu Ghraib scandal. So armed forces can lose their way. So this was a case of Australian armed forces losing their way in Afghanistan over a long period of time between 2007 and 2013. But how was it discovered? My Lai was revealed by an investigative journalist, but in this case, the Australians themselves, again ABC, Australian Broadcasting Corporation, did something on this. But Major General Justice Paul Brereton, so obviously he's from what we might call the Judge Advocate General's branch. I don't know what they call it in Australia. So Major General Justice Paul Brereton, he held 4 years of inquiry. For 4 years, he inquired into these charges that surfaced essentially in Australian media. He examined 20,000 documents, 25,000 images, and 423 witnesses. And now he has confirmed the murder, cold-blooded, brutal murder of at least 39 Afghan civilians in 23 incidents. Now, and how does he describe it? He describes it as disgraceful and profound betrayal of Australian Defence Forces. He's also named 25 perpetrators besides many accessories who helped them and who looked the other way. He's also listed examples where a young soldier was blooded by getting him to shoot a prisoner. And another case has surfaced now, which he has not talked about in his report, although large parts of his report, as they've been revealed, are still redacted or edited out or still classified. But he has not mentioned this incident, but there's a Guardian story which we are sharing with you, and there are visuals there of Australian soldiers drinking beer, drunken Australian soldiers drinking beer from the prosthetic leg of a dead Taliban fighter. So the dead Taliban fighter who might have lost a leg earlier now walks on a prosthetic leg. He dies, you pull out the prosthetic leg, you take it to your base as a souvenir or booty of war, which is illegal, which is a war crime. And then in your base, you are running an illegal bar that the judge talks about. That bar is called Fat Ladies Arms. Soldiers, special forces, Fat Ladies Arms. So you have an illegal bar in your base. There you use this prosthetic leg to drink beer from it in a group. You also dance with this leg. Now that is not conduct that any professional army can be proud of. In fact, that is not conduct that any professional army will not be ashamed of, and that is precisely what's happened in this case. So, dancing with war booty. First of all, even picking up the war booty. This Australian army base was in a place called Tarin Court. Now, even picking up a soldier's prosthetic leg is like taking away war booty. It is a war crime, and professional armies do not tolerate it. And I can give you a couple of old examples from India. In 1971, we'll soon be reaching the anniversary of the 1971 war on 3rd of December. Just a couple of days from now, that anniversary celebrations will begin. But it was just as the war ended that one of the most celebrated generals in that war, a major general, I shall not name him now because lots of time has passed and their families and their grandchildren. One of the more celebrated officers in that war, a major general, was dismissed by Mrs. Gandhi and General Sam Manekshaw. Why? Because he had picked up something from Bangladesh as his war booty. I don't know for sure, maybe someone like General Panag can tell you more about it, but probably it was a car which was driven back into Shillong, if I am not mistaken, to say that look, this is war booty, but professional armies do not allow war booties, and they are very firm about this. Similarly, after Operation Blue Stars, some officers of one particular battalion which had actually fought very well and suffered very high casualties, it was in the front of the assault on the Akal Takht on that bloody night. Several officers were punished later. Why? Not because of something they did while fighting. They fought within the bounds of ethics, but they allegedly picked up some weapons, some of the terrorist weapons, as the booty of war. So this is not the warrior culture that professional armies permit, and that is what seems to have happened here. So judge talks about issues like drinking on operations, lax standards of dressing, poor personal hygiene and behavior also. And he says these are not something that any professional army would allow. Then the report also tells you that this is in violation of section 268.81 of Commonwealth Criminal Code, which means pillaging the property of somebody you've killed or somebody you've captured attracts a jail sentence of how much? 20 years. So this is a very serious offense. In fact, former military lawyer Glenn Polomeades in Australia says that this is something which is a chargeable offense and get a very high sentence. Now, Australian government has decided to investigate 19 soldiers. They've also ordered the dismissal of 13. Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, has apologized in public. He also called his Afghan counterpart Ashraf Ghani and apologized to him, and he said, look, this is, my country has to face the brutal truth. This entire inquiry report will come out. This should never have happened, and I promise you that we will do justice in this case. The profoundest of all apologies, in fact, has come from the Australian Defence Forces chief, that is General Angus Campbell, who in a long speech, he complimented his troops who've done well, but he also apologized unqualifiedly for these offenses that his troops have committed. And I will quote 3 quick points from his speech for you. He says, number 1, that they have profoundly disrespected the trust placed in us by the Afghan people and the Afghan government, which invited us for help against the terrorists. Number 2, he says this has devastated and destroyed the lives of Afghan families and many communities, which is a terrible thing. And third, he says, look, this kind of behavior endangered the safety of both the mission and also the troops involved there, and also our allies and friends. So now this is as clear an apology as you could see anywhere. And the Australians have done it, and that's why they are so upset that after doing all this, now they are being shamed like this by the Chinese. Now, why are the Chinese doing what they are doing? Now, we worry about the Chinese because they are sitting on our borders in Ladakh and refusing to go away. In fact, my favorite expression, धरना दे के बैठे हुए हैं वहाँ पे, नहीं जा रहे, हम लोग भी धरना दे के वहाँ पे बैठ गए, हम भी नहीं जा रहे. So, temperature is -20. In fact, today's satellite pictures show that Pangong Tso, the lake, has begun to freeze now. Ice is forming there now. So, the Chinese are giving us trouble like that. But the Chinese are not fighting us militarily, actively in terms of causing damage, barring that one clash at Galwan, where we suffered some damage, they also suffered some damage and loss of life. But on Australia, they've launched a war, an active war, not a military war. Australia is too far away. They've launched on Australia a trade war because, as we had mentioned in our episode 623, China accounts for 1/3 of all of Australia's exports, and things like wine, barley, meat, which not many other countries can consume, or not many other countries where can replace the Chinese as buyers, because Chinese are such a big market now. And I'm reading an article in South China Morning Post by Alex Lowe, who's an expert, and we are sharing that article with you, who says that Australia and China are now caught in the Thucydides trap. So what is Thucydides trap? Thucydides was a 5th century BC. So I think he died in 411 BC. Greek historian, philosopher. And he wrote the history of the Peloponnesian War. And he came up with this idea, why did the war take place between Athens and Sparta, the 30-year war? Because Athens had begun to rise. So because Athens had begun to rise as a power, it worried Sparta, the existing power or entrenched power, a great deal. And it worried it to such an extent that a war between the two became inevitable. And that's how the 30-year war took place. In an article in Financial Times in 2012, a Harvard professor and former Assistant Secretary of Defense, Graham T. Allison, he gave it a name. He called it the Thucydides trap, which means when such a situation emerges in the world, when one emerging power threatens to dislodge an existing great power. So you fill in the blanks. Emerging power is China. Existing power is America. When an emerging power threatens to dislodge an existing power, that means when Athens threatens to dislodge Sparta, then the space opens up for a great global hegemon. So the existing power is this global hegemon. The emerging power is threatening it. When that happens, then a war of a kind becomes inevitable. That is the Thucydides trap in which Australia and China find themselves. A war is broken out. The war at the moment is one-sided, but the war is not military. It is the war of trade. Now, as Alex Lowe explains, that everybody knew this situation because there is a contradiction between where Australia is and who Australia is. Why do we say so? Because Australia is geographically located in the east, he says, but it's ideologically located in the west. It's part of the Five Eyes Alliance, that is the strong alliance of 5 English-speaking countries: US, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand. So whatever happens, push comes to the shove between America and China, it will have to be with China. Even on India, it is part of the Quad now, where India, China, India, Australia, Japan, US are together. So it's not on the Chinese side. So far, there was a marriage of convenience going on, whereby both China and America, or both China and Australia, but more China than Australia, ignored this ideological and strategic aspect and went on improving their trade and economic relationships. Very similar to what's been happening between India and China for the past 20 years or 25 years since the two countries decided to normalize their relations. So the idea then between India and China also was, on the Indian side was that, theek hai, border is not being settled, the Chinese are much too powerful militarily, They are not willing to settle. So let us grow our economic relationship. Maybe this will build such a large economic vested interest for the Chinese that they will see the benefits of peace. So you then get peace for trade or peace for economic benefit. Maybe the Australians thought something like that also, and Chinese strung them along. What has now happened is Australia has become so dependent on China for its exports that China now has the ability to strangle Australia economically. In fact, if you look at the data that's available in international sources, it tells you that if just this trade the Chinese want to strangle Australia, they can take away 6% from Australia's GDP. 6% GDP from a small population, small but a very rich population. So they can take away 6% of the GDP and 14.5% of these spending surpluses with Australia's people. In contrast, what will happen to China will be small. They will lose 0.5% of their GDP and maybe 2.5% of their citizens' average spending surplus. So this is really big bang for the buck for the Chinese. And Australians find this in a one-sided battle. And this is what the Australians have to deal with. Now, what do the Chinese have to worry about? They have to worry about ores, metals, because Australia is a big exporter to them. Iron ore, for example. But what are the Chinese doing? Chinese have this now, one belt, one road, and they are now setting up alliances all over. So they are getting very good sources of very good quality iron ore and bauxite from West Africa, particularly Guinea. Now, remember bauxite? Bauxite is the ore for aluminum. Aluminum is now a metal on the rise. There is global rising demand for aluminum for many years now. It's also the most environment friendly metal, unlike iron. Just remember, what did we do to our bauxite? More than almost 10 years back, a bunch of activists and Rahul Gandhi went to Niamgiri and prevented mining at the richest bauxite minings in India and among the richest bauxite minings in the world. China needs that bauxite. Obviously, it would not want India to have that bauxite. Australians will not give it. It doesn't want to buy it from the Australians now. So it's now got sources in West Africa. So these metals, also rare earths, we will talk about those in the course of time in a separate Karta Clutter. These are the new oil. That old oil, as in petroleum, now is passé. These metals are the new oil. This is what a lot of it is what Australia was selling to China. But today China knows that if they stop buying it from Australia, they will not hurt because they can get it from Africa. So that is where this situation now stands. So once again, in conclusion, I again use the words of Alex Lowe. It's a wonderful line. I wish it was mine, but it is not. It is his, so credit where it's due. He says the Australians are now realizing that in this bargain, they have lost their best customer, and in return, they won their worst enemy. And that is the reason now that we are talking about Australia for a second time within a week.